All right, it is July 5, 2014, and we're going to be studying Zechariah 1 in the light of the first angel's message and in relation to Revelation 10. So let's pray. Heavenly Family, we want to thank you for loving us so very much. Thank you for being so gracious to us and pleading with us for so long and bringing us now to this point, the point of the kingdom sprouting in the wilderness. Heavenly Family, help us to understand justification by faith and help us to see it all throughout the scriptures. Help us to look at these different passages, such as the one we're going to look at now, and we just want you to guide us, sister, to see your love in this, the love of our whole Heavenly Family. And we want to see how this relates to everything that would inform us more of the gospel. So guide us, and sister, we trust you to lead us in all things. And thank you for being so kind and so good and just accomplishing the tasks that you've been given so wonderfully. So thank you, Heavenly Family. Thank you, Father and Mother, in the name of the branch, he and she. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So, in connection with Revelation 10, which we looked at last time, we have this other passage, Zechariah 1. And we, perhaps most people wouldn't connect those passages, but it's a passage which we should have connected. And we're going to go through the reasons why. But you're all familiar with the Rod message anyways, in which he explains how these passages are connected. So we want to look at it, and again, this is all still part of our discussion of the first angel's message, and last night it was less directly on the first angel's message in terms of the very obvious things that explain the message itself. But Revelation 10 is explaining in a particular way the history connected with that message and going beyond just the first. So there's a number of elements that we didn't get into, but it's the same with Zechariah. It shows this history of the first angel's message, but it extends beyond that. And we're just going to look at it. I mean, this isn't something that was understood as part of the first angel's message when it was first being proclaimed in the 1840s. At least not so far as I know. If some Millerites commented on it, I'm unaware of that. But it's one of the things that, since we looked at Revelation 10, it's a good time to look at Zechariah 1. And then perhaps we'll be getting into the second angel's message next weekend, unless something else comes up. But first, maybe we'll just read Zechariah 1, and if I could get you to do that, Teresa, that would be great.
In the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, The Lord hath been sore displeased with your fathers. Therefore say unto them, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Turn ye unto me, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will turn unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. Be ye not as your fathers, unto whom the former prophets have cried, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Turn ye now from your evil ways, and from your evil doings. But they did not hear, nor hearken unto me, saith the Lord. Your fathers, where are they? And the prophets, do they live forever? But my words and my statutes, which I commanded my servants the prophets, did they not take hold of your fathers? And they returned and said, Like as the Lord of hosts thought to do unto us, according to our ways and according to our doings, so hath he dealt with us.
So those first 6 verses, that's kind of the introduction to the book of Zechariah as we have it today. And as we see, it's the 8th month in the 2nd year of Darius. And following this, there is a record of 8 visions that Zechariah had. And we're just going to now read the first one, which is from verse 7 to 17. So if you want to do that.
Upon the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month Sebat, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo the prophet, saying, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and behind him were their red horses speckled and white. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord hath sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still and is at rest. Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast indignation these 70 years? And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. Cry yet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, My cities through prosperity shall yet be spread abroad, and the Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem.
All right. So that's the passage under consideration. Now, to just address some of the connection between Revelation 10 and this passage, first, we have this passage, the context of it is the return from Babylon. And they had just gone through this experience, and Zechariah sees this vision, which we'll get into some of the particulars of in a moment or two, and then there is this little bit of explanation of the vision and further dialogue between the angel of Yahweh and Yahweh of hosts, and then we get to this proclamation of a line being stretched over Jerusalem, and the command to cry yet. Now, after this, in verse 16 of chapter 1 of Zechariah, when it talks about stretching forth a line upon Jerusalem, this whole thing of going and measuring Jerusalem takes place in chapter 2, and right after that, there is this establishment of the kingdom that is spoken of. Now, in Revelation 10, we have a similar frame of, or the structure of how it's laid out. And I'll just mention some of the elements now. And this is it's showing how John wrote Revelation 10 in such a way that it will connect these passages together, because it's built off the same framework as what we see in Zechariah 1. So in the sixth trumpet, there is the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates, which, of course, is a symbol of Babylon. And so we have this whole thing with Babylon, and which was the first element and context of Zechariah, and this is the return from Babylon. Likewise, Revelation 10 is showing something about the return from Babylon, only with greater glory, because when they returned from Babylon, it would have made sense for the Shekinah to come back and dwell among them. That's what they had hoped for. In Revelation 10, we do have the return of the Shekinah in this context of coming back from Babylon. And we know that for a few reasons in terms of coming back from Babylon, both just the context of the 6th trumpet, but also the idea of the first and second angel's messages being represented in Revelation 10 by the angel putting his foot upon the sea, his right foot upon the sea and his left foot upon the earth. Now, continuing this, it shows a symbolic representation of something, which likewise in Revelation 10, there's this symbolic representation of something. And then there's a measuring or stretching a line over Jerusalem. And in Revelation 11, at the beginning, it gets to this measuring or stretching a line over the temple. And then it talks about the holy city being trod down. And then in Revelation 10, at the end of it, again, it talks about, thou must prophesy again. In Zechariah 1, verse 17, it says, cry yet. You know, it's showing there are these similar things. Now, after the stretching of the line in chapter 2 of Zechariah, it's talking about the glory in the midst of her and the nations, you know, being delivered from Babylon, and the nations come and join the kingdom. In Revelation 11, after this whole scenario with the measuring of the temple, there is the 7th trumpet, which is the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So we see here some of these parallel ideas and themes, and it's a very similar structure as to how the whole thing is even set up. So there's some sort of parallel here, and the measuring is a specific thing that should draw our attention back to Zechariah 1 and 2, which is why in most Bibles it's probably footnoted or in the reference bar from Revelation 11. And also in Zechariah 2 in my Bible, it references Revelation 11:1. Now, we already looked at Revelation 10, so we know that Zechariah 1 should be talking about something similar, given the sameness that we find in the structure and the ideas being discussed. So the first vision in chapter 1 verse 8 of Zechariah is when it first kind of mentions some of the idea here. Now, what it says in verse 8 is, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom. And behind him were there red horses, speckled and white. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will shew thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord hath sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees, and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still, and is at rest. So, the first time that we had an understanding provided of this through inspiration, as you guys know, is in the Rod message. And Hodif explains it in a few places. In tract 6, page, I guess starting on page 60, he gets into this passage, as well as, it's page 60 to 63, and, or maybe 64, let's say. And then also Timely Greetings, Volume 1, number 11, is another place where he gets into this. And he gets into it and explains it fairly well. He doesn't cover every aspect. In fact, at the beginning of his discussion of this in Zechariah 6, or not in Zechariah 6, in tract 6, this is what he says. This is the top of page 62. He says, The two sheep and the young cow, Isaiah 7, are, as already shown, giving a more abundant supply of milk than we can immediately deliver. So, in the ensuing study of Zechariah 1, we are compelled, just as we were in the study of Isaiah 7, also in that of Zechariah 4, to dispense only the butter, cream, and to preserve the milk. So you see that Hodif here is stating how the presentation that he is giving of the subject is limited in nature. And in the Timely Greeting where he gets into this, it's also limited, although he does get into a little bit more. Now, Ben Roden does get into this a little bit more yet. But does somebody remember what Hodif explained in Zechariah 1 to be about in relation to the first vision?
It's the Millerite movement.
It's the Millerite movement. That's correct. And he talks about it in terms of, okay, there was this 70-year captivity in Babylon, which was a type for the period of Babylonian captivity in the Dark Ages. And that's when this prophecy was given, showing that its fulfillment would be at the close of that period in antitype, in other words, at the close of the Dark Ages. And then he showed how you have these horses, which are clearly sent as servants of the Lord throughout the whole earth, and they have something, their horses are representative of ministers, which this passage itself shows, as well as Zechariah 6 and Zechariah 14, amongst other places. And so he was showing this and saying, okay, so this is at the close of the Dark Age Babylonian captivity, and there are servants of the Lord sent throughout the whole earth, and they are red horses, speckled and white, and he was, and some translate it red, brown, and white, actually. But what he was showing is that this is showing a diversity of the ministers, and he was saying it wasn't all just one race, it was a multiracial ministry, and that they would go throughout the whole earth, and they would, when they are viewed in verse 11 of chapter 1, they had already gone through the whole earth, and then after they do that, and the whole earth sits still and is at rest, in other words, it doesn't budge, then they're told to cry yet. And he was seeing this cry yet as being parallel to Revelation 10, verse 11, where they're told to prophesy again. And here he was seeing the horses as representing the Millerites after they had finished proclaiming the first angel's message. So we have this whole presentation here. And when we understand that type and antitype, then we can see how that is quite the fair understanding of Zechariah 1. Now, again, he presented a limited view of the subject, and so we won't be reading a whole lot of what he said, and there was more to be revealed. For instance, he never explained anything about the man on the red horse and who that is. And I'm not sure how many of you guys have read Ben Roden's studies on this subject, but it's a great couple studies. Zechariah, the branch and the light of Zechariah 1 and 2. It's just demonstrated in a nice, clear way. Now, we'll just get a brief understanding of what this is referring to, and then we'll talk a little bit about how this relates to the first angel's message as well as to present truth in light of the gospel, in other words.
Question?
Yes.
Are we told who the man in the myrtle trees is? If I knew, I completely forgot, so I just need to be refreshed or told.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Haddock never explained, but that Ben Roden explained.
He's the one on the red horse. Yeah, that's the guy that Trent was just, that was the guy that Trent was just talking about. He's on the red horse. He's the man in the myrtle tree.
Oh, same one. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to read a little bit from Ben Roden's view of this subject, and it'll be in it's a study that he wrote called The Branch in the Light of Zechariah 1 and 2. And it's lesson number 5 is what it says on the website, which I'm pretty sure is actually branch letter 2-5 or 2-5. And so the way that Ben Roden phrases things and puts things, it's very nice visually. So for those of you who have the study, it'd be great if you could pull it up. And if not, it's on the branch website under publications. And then under Ben, you'll see the branch in the light of Zechariah 1 and 2.
Yeah, all I have to do is on the home page, just hover over Ben's name.
Yeah.
in case they're going there from that direction.
Okay.
So we're going to read just a little bit of what Ben says on this. Subject: the branch in the light of Zechariah 1 and 2. The three angels' messages in the light of the fourfold symbolism of Zechariah 1 verses 7 to 17 and the threefold symbolism of Zechariah 2 verses 1 to 5. So he's saying that this first vision is a fourfold symbolism, and the vision of Zechariah 2 verses 1 to 5, which is the second vision, is of a threefold symbolism. So the purpose is to identify each fold of these two symbolisms and show that the fourth fold and third fold represent the branch as it joins the third angel of 1844. And we're going to skip, he has a couple gem thoughts, which we'll skip for right now. Zechariah chapter 1, fourfold symbolism. And so he points out here, he says, Zechariah 1 verses 7 to 17, which is the vision that we just read, disclose three groups. The one is three horses, or horses, with three different characteristics that it mentions, which is in verse 8. Another is Zechariah and the angel, which is in verse 9. And another is the man on the red horse, or the man among the myrtle trees, verse 8. And so he addresses group 1, and he points out that Victor Hoddif's track on the subject, Why Parish Track 6, page 60 to 66, shows that horses represent messages and movements, and horses walk through the earth 3 times. The first time was in representation of the Millerite movement, as it warned the earth of the end and then came to rest, thinking the work was finished. Which again, that was the first angel's message. And the second time is after the disappointment, when the horses are told to cry again, or cry yet, Zechariah 1:17, or to prophesy again, Revelation 10, verse 11. And that's the SDA 1844 commission to go to many nations. And then the third time is when they go to all nations, as recorded in track 6, page 66, says necessarily then it must receive another commission, one to go to all nations. And also the next paragraph of track 6, page 66 says there is another message to join the third angel. So, and then Ben Roden just pointing out how the angel of Revelation 18:1 is one to direct the third angel's message. Now, one thing that he gets into here, and we'll actually just go into this a little bit more because he shows some of the representations here and where the rod and the branch are in this prophecy. Because we know we have the Millerite movement represented by the horses, and we know that when they are giving their commission to cry yet, it's after the disappointment, and that's showing the Seventh-day Adventist movement. So those are two main movements, and actually the Millerite movement and the Advent movement are joined together into one movement. And then what about the rod movement and the branch movement? Because those are the two other main movements that we've seen in so many studies, like Ezekiel 16. So, he says, question, is the addition that joins the three horses and subsequently directs their work or their walk to all nations represented in this symbolism of Zechariah 1 verses 7 to 17? Answer. Group 2. The rod is silent concerning these two, Zechariah and the angel. So remember, the first group was the 3 horses. The second group is Zechariah and the angel, and the rod never explained what they represent. And Ben wrote and said, "It is now time to reveal their identity." Zechariah questioned the angel about the horses. Verse 9, the angel answered, "I will show thee what these be." Notice the chart on page 61 of tract 6 shows a shepherd's rod in the angel's hand. The angel is interested in Jerusalem. Verse 12. Therefore, the angel represents the shepherd's rod message, New Jerusalem, the kingdom, and Zechariah represents Victor Hada. Yes, the antitypical Zechariah, Victor Hada, tells us in tract 6 what the angel told him about the horses. So you see that how in the prophecy, Zechariah asks the angel what the truth is concerning the horses. And so the Zechariah and the angel represents the rod message because that is the message that brought us the truth of the horses. So they're represented in group 2 as far as the symbolic groups in the passage. Now there's another question. Does Zechariah and the angel, now identified, hold the reins, direct the 3 horses on their walk to all nations? Answer, evidently not. For the Symbolic Code, October, November, December, issue 1938, tells us that the Lord did not then have the reins in his own hands, but that at some future time he would. Further, since the rod of Revelation 7 ascended, while the directing angel descends, then the rod, not the answer is then what it's saying, or the rod is not the answer. And then he's getting to group 3. We must look further into Zechariah's symbolism for the identity of the one who directs the 3 angels' message in its final walk, is how it's put here. Also, welcome to whoever phoned in. We're looking at Zechariah chapter 1, and we were reading a little bit of a study from Ben Roden, and it's called The Branch in the Light of Zechariah 1 and 2. And we're not going to read the whole thing, but if you guys do read the whole thing, it will be more enlightening. So he's about to get into group 3. Again, the first group was the horses. The second group was Zechariah and the angel. And the third is actually the man riding the red horse. So group 3, where the rod is silent concerning man on red horse, the branch now speaks. Man riding red horse, variously termed, and he puts 3 things: man, verse 10, angel, verse 11, and Lord, verse 13. And when you read Zechariah 1, verse 11, the one riding the red horse, who's among the myrtle trees, is in verse 11 called the angel of the Lord, because it says, "Then answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees." So you see, the angel of the Lord stood among the myrtle trees.
So the angel of the Lord is the same as the man in verse 10 that stood among the myrtle trees.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the angel of the Lord, as we've viewed in multiple other passages, which we won't get into right now, but I could mention some of the passages perhaps. That angel is a representative of Christ. The angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahweh, is a Yahweh in a number of these passages, such as Judges 6, I believe, is one. There's also Genesis 18 and Exodus 23. Those are some passages that talk about the angel of Yahweh as something more than just an angel. We know that the angel of Yahweh is Christ. Some passages Christ masculine, some Christ feminine. Now, so here, he says, Ben Roden continuing on in this study, he says, man is very, and he's talking about the man on the red horse, the man is very interested in Jerusalem, for he has returned with mercies to build and prosper her, verses 14 to 17. And man is depicted on chart in track 6, page 61, as holding the reins of the red horse in his hands. And then he says, the man is the Lord, returned to do or to direct the work and take the reins in his own hands. And then he quotes a number of things concerning the coming of the branch as represented in a number of different prophecies. And then he kind of gives a little bit more information, so we're going to read a tiny little bit more here. He says, the branch joins and directs the three horses, third angel's message, on their third walk throughout the earth, beginning at God's house, 1 Peter 4:17. And he says, and he's quoting here from Isaiah 66, verses 19 and 20, I, the branch, will send those that escape of them unto the nations, and they shall bring all your brethren out of all nations. And he says, make note, the red horse says nothing. Those within should know better than to tempt themselves, to tell the branch how to teach his message. Now, then he gives a little illustration here, showing the red horse, and it becomes the white horse. And so he puts red, which is before Ezekiel 9, and after that, it's the white horse in purity, like it says in Isaiah 1, verse 18. You know, your sins are as red as crimson, but they shall be as white as snow. Mm-hmm. And he says righteousness as filthy rags is the red horse, which we know is a menstrual cloth. And then our righteousness is Christ our righteousness, with the white horse, the purified church. And then we have before the purification and after the purification, and he puts Isaiah 4 on that, and the horse doesn't speak, and then it does speak. And he puts Revelation 9, verse 17 for that. So he's showing this contrast and how the red horse is showing this branch movement.
Red horse, pre-resurrection.
Yeah, pre-purification.
Christ still taking the reins in his own hands at that stage when the horse is still red. Then the horse becomes the purified ministry.
Yes, and then the Lord rides his white horse, which is in Revelation 19. So he says here, see the seals chart. Branch, second Adam, rides white horse. And that kind of, to understand that better, one would have to read, I believe it's a study called The Man on the White Horse. Let me just double check that.
There is one called The Man on the White Horse.
Yeah, The Man on the White Horse, where he gets into the antitypical significance of the first seal in relation to Adam and the second Adam. And so we won't get all into that now or anything, but that's what he's referring to in this study, or that same idea, which he expounds a lot more in the study, The Man on the White Horse. So he kind of sums up some of this. There's identity revealed. Group 1 is, Miller and White, the first Group 1 again was the horses. Miller and White, first and second phase, horses fused into one movement, which those two movements initially were the 6th and 9th hour, or third angel. The second group is the Davidian, which is third phase, and it's Zechariah and the angel, and then group 3 is the branch, the fourth phase, the man on the red horse. And so he shows two mergers, and then he just goes on beyond this and ends up getting into Zechariah chapter 2. So again, we won't get all into that now, but welcome, Princeton. Hello. We're looking at Zechariah 1. So basically what we see here is a representation of these different movements. Now, we have the man riding the red horse, we see represents Christ, the branch. The red horse is the branch movement, the one whom he rides. The myrtle trees represent the leaders, which we won't really comment much more on that. That will be a subject to be gotten into more in the book on the seven thunders, because the myrtle trees is one of the trees. I believe it's the 5th tree in the trees listed in the vision of the seven thunders. And that should give you an indication right there that it's the 5th tree. So we see this, and one thing that Ben didn't comment on is that it says, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom. Some translations say something like ravine, and it's the idea, the word that's used there is it's like in a ravine of mountains, and in the bottom of the ravine is a patch of myrtle trees in which is this man on the red horse, and behind him the other horses. So again, in between the mountains representing churches, there is kind of in the bottom, hidden, obscured from view, kind of, you know, right at the bottom at the roots of things, the roots of the mountains, a place where you wouldn't necessarily expect to look is this branch movement. And Christ, the branch, is there amongst them. And behind him, again, are red horses, speckled and white, representative of the Millerite movement. And welcome as well, Walter. So we see this whole thing, and then of course Zechariah and the angel, a representation of the rod message. So that kind of just gives the outline of what the passage itself is talking about. It goes again a little further than Revelation 10 as far as within the chapter itself. And there's a representation here of that first angel's message of them going to and fro through the earth, but the earth did not move, but was at rest. And then there's the command to cry yet in verse 17. So we can see what that's all referring to now, and that's kind of the first important step. And some of you, again, may have been familiar with this if you read Ben Roden's studies on the subject. If not, though, then I'm glad that you're able to be exposed to it right now. But when we look at this, let's just kind of take this and see how most people might read this passage. One is that people will read this just as a historical narrative and read it as though the visions relate only to the ancient return from Babylon. And when we do this, what happens, and I'm sure this is what the majority of commentators likely say, and it's that the vision we can't really discern what it's speaking of. We don't really know, because what are these horses? Some view these horses, the red, speckled, and white, as different nations. But again, these horses were sent by the Lord to go to and fro through the earth. And the earth wasn't moved as a result. And then they are commanded to cry yet. That doesn't really have anything to do with nations. And there's not really a foundation for the idea of horses representing nations. And so, we have this whole thing. People might just look at it and say, okay, well, this is depicting the return from Babylon, and viewing it in a very generic sense without getting into detail. But again, if we do that, how does that influence how we look at the rest of Zechariah, for example? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's no meaning for us today.
Yeah.
If it's all historical.
No meaning for us today, right? And then, here's the thing. In Zechariah 1, part of this first vision actually makes reference to the second vision. Actually, he's talking there about how there'd be a line stretched forth upon Jerusalem. Well, that's what happens in Zechariah 2. And if we view Zechariah 1 and this whole thing with the horses as merely being a historical thing, referring to the days of Zechariah himself, then we would have to understand this Zechariah 2 to be referring to the days of Zechariah himself. In which case, we kind of end up with this whole thought of, well, either Zechariah was a false prophet because what he said didn't come to pass, or we get into this whole thing of saying, oh, well, it didn't have to come to pass as it was written because it was conditional, and so on and so forth. Now, these are some aspects of this. It influences how we look at all of Zechariah, though. If we view that like that, then Zechariah 3 will view like that, and all the way through. Others, in Protestantism and so on, may look at this as all something which is totally future from us, and may have some sort of very literal interpretation of some of these things, which, again, just gets into obscurity and Babylon itself. So, the truth is, these passages have connection with other passages. It's a confirmation. I mean, in Revelation, I was about to mention something from Ellen White, which I will, but then I'm going to mention something else, which teaches the same lesson. Ellen White points out that in the Revelation, all the books of the Bible meet and end. Now, this is something that people know anyways, because Revelation alludes to all these other passages in the Bible. I think 90-some% of Revelation is actually allusions or quotes to other passages from the Old Testament. So again, if we misunderstand all these Old Testament prophecies, we're doomed to misunderstand Revelation. And when we understand Revelation, it helps us to understand these other prophecies. So Zechariah 1, again, being connected with Revelation 10, it's showing us some sort of further understanding or another witness of what is going on in that chapter. And as we saw, it's very important because it's talking about the mystery of God, and it's talking about this seven thunders. Now, if we understand that there's a connection between Zechariah and Revelation 10, maybe we'll also be open to the thought that these seven thunders are spoken of in Zechariah, which is another important thing not to miss, which we would miss if we viewed this as merely historical or had any other interpretation of it as the truth. And just in light of what we went through last night, that in itself is very important to know the truth of the seven thunders. And in order to do that, we have to understand the scriptures which pertain to the seven thunders. And Zechariah 3 is one of them, where there is a stone with seven eyes laid before Joshua, and that stone is also spoken of as a plummet of tin or a stone of tin in Zechariah 4, which it says are the seven eyes. So, again, that's getting into this whole idea of the seven thunders, which we're not going to get into right now. But either way, we have this representation of the first angel's message. We saw that it didn't go through. We saw prophecy was fulfilled. And we see now, in connection with this, Revelation and Christ himself being represented. Now, some of the things here is going to be easier in Ben Roden's studies. It's going to be a whole lot easier for Davidian to understand some of these things than anyone else, because he's building upon the foundation of the law. And if someone doesn't have that foundation, they are going to miss and not see easily the vast majority of what Ben Roden says in these studies. Now, if we want to view this in a very kind of specific way to the first angel's message, again, the thing which gets to that most specifically is these horses. They walk to and fro, and the earth is not moved. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments as to how that, the truth of it, or the misunderstanding of it, might relate to the subject of justification by faith? I'll ask a question. Will the earth ever be moved?
Yes. Will the earth ever be moved?
Yeah.
Yes, it will. And yeah, so now I see what you're getting at, because the reason why, even though they did what the Lord commanded them to do, they weren't justified by faith, so they didn't have the characters required in order to move the earth, to receive justification by faith, receive the message, receive the truth and the love of the truth.
Amen. I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean, we're told that Christ is waiting for his character to be perfectly represented in his people, right? Now, if that's so, and if the earth will one day be moved, and the earth was, there was an attempt to move the earth in the days of the first angel's message, well, man, it shows that there was something that was missing from the picture. They didn't have the gospel restored to them. They had a great noise, and it caused a shaking, as represented in the second angel's message. And as a result of that, bone came together with bone. You guys know the story in Ezekiel 37. But they did not then have the reality of the gospel manifested in their lives. And therefore, they did not have the power to proclaim that gospel in such a way that there could be a harvest of, well, not only a wave sheaf and a first fruits, but even a second fruits. It couldn't be done. And it's not even that they were necessarily at fault. Go ahead.
Sorry, I went for a break, but you weren't quite finished.
Oh, no, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was watching this thing that was posted by one of my Facebook friends who's an Adventist, and it was an evangelist doing a prophecy seminar. What was that guy's name? He's real famous. It doesn't matter. Joe Cruz, anyway. But he was explaining the seal of God, and everybody's heard that, in the seminars. And so he was talking about, he was showing, very succinctly how the seal is in the law and what the seal has to entail, and then he goes to Isaiah and talks about, the law being written. He will write it in I believe it's Isaiah, write it in our foreheads, and then something to do with our hands, and then write it in our hearts, put it in our foreheads, blah, blah. And so, anyway, so then he goes on to expound on that, and he says, there's only another time where it mentions something being in our foreheads, and, so he makes it clear that it's in your forehead because you understand it, and then the symbolism of the hand has to do with your acting on it. And then I'm thinking, yeah, he left out the heart, the most important part. And they shoot those people in with this intellectual understanding and then get them to work using their hands, following the law, and then they keep that part about it being hidden in their heart, the true gospel, hidden from those people. They completely keep it away from them.
How sad, eh?
Yeah.
How very sad. That's the thing. All these truths are to bring us to be able to receive a new heart. That's what the Millerites really needed. That's what they really needed. And, this Zechariah 1, it shows you, it's rather than it just being a picture of what happened to the Millerites, it's a picture of the rod message revealing the history of the Millerites. But even then, there's, okay, well, what are these things? Says Zechariah. The angel, I'll show you what these things are. And then the man on the red horse said, these are they whom the Lord has sent to walk through and fro through the earth. And this whole thing, it's showing you a progressive movement. I won't get into this, but I'm going to mention it to just bring a little bit broader view here. And then I want to mention something more about this man on the red horse. So in Zechariah 2, we have this picture of the command to measure with a line Jerusalem. And the man goes forth, and then it says goes forth to meet him, and then another angel goes forth to meet him and tells him to run and speak to the young man. So we see the young man, we see one angel going to meet him, then we see another angel coming to the first angel and telling him to go say to the young man that Jerusalem shall be inhabited as a town without walls, so on and so forth. The way that Hoddes explained the young man is that the young man represents SDA church, because they have a very small picture of the last part. And so what Ben wrote and explained is that the angel that goes forth to meet the young man is the first one that went forth, the first angel, the first message that came to the Adventist church. After it was formed as a distinct entity, and so on and so forth, and how that was the raw message that came to go and tell about Jerusalem. But then there's another angel, another message that comes to meet that angel, who comes to meet that message and tell him to go and say something to man. And so that was a symbol of the branch message, an addition to the addition, basically. And so that whole thing, it shows us the same representation that we saw in Zechariah 1. Now the thing in Zechariah 1 that it is showing us is that here's this man, and he's riding a red horse. So it shows us that not only were the Millerites in a condition that they couldn't finish the work of the gospel to the whole world, but that even after the revelation of this prophecy through the rod message and the further unfolding of it in the branch message, still the branch is represented, Christ is represented, as ruling an unconverted people, as riding a red horse. And it's really, the way that he showed it there, of righteousness as filthy rags, but then Christ will end up riding a white horse, which will be pure. It's just showing us again the impure condition of the branch, and this is again in particular the message of the branch seed under Ben Roden, and it was still in an impure condition. Now, all these things should bring us to the realization of our great need. Earlier today, when we were studying with someone, we were talking about this whole idea of where sin abounds, grace does much more abound. And the reason why sin abounds is because the law enters. So the law enters and sin abounds. In other words, law enters and you see your own sinfulness and how wicked it is. And then grace is revealed because we see our sinfulness. Because we see how much our Heavenly Family loves us, even in our low and terrible condition. And then in that, grace can reign in the life through righteousness. So all these things are to show us the deplorable condition. So we see these three groups. We see the horses, Zechariah and the angel, and man and myrtle trees. Well, man and myrtle trees isn't showing the greatest condition. Horses aren't showing the greatest condition. They have failed in their work, or they were unable to accomplish the finishing of the gospel. Is a better way to do it. They did what they were sent to do, but it just did not have the desired effect. Zechariah and the angel, again, is just viewed in the picture of seeking, but not in a condition of being able to do anything or interact with it or anything like that, almost in a passive state. All of it is showing us that there's a need for something more. All of it is showing us how, the first angel's message, when it first came, they weren't able to finish the work. When the first angel's message came around again, in its repetition in the rod message, well, it was just starting to get a grip of what happened in the first angel's message first time around. And then the branch message comes around, and it's a repetition of the second angel's message, and it's supposed to be calling people out of Babylon. But then Christ, at that time, is still having to ride an impure horse, an impure people. And so the whole thing just screams out for a need of conversion. But there's hope there, you know? In verse 12, it says, "Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast indignation these 70 years?" So there we have this angel of the Lord, and we essentially see the crying out of Christ to, how long is this going to last, right? Because, remember, at the time when the angels, or when the horses rather, finished that work, that's when Christ went to the most holy place. And it makes sense to then ask, how long is this going to last? You know, here's this cleansing of the sanctuary. This is a work to be done. This is the final finishing up of the work of Christ. And how long will it last? In verse 13 it says, "And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words." So there's a positive picture of this. "So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy." So we see here that there is, on the side of our Heavenly Family, a crying out and a wanting and desire to bring us to fullness. Because, I mean, jealous for Jerusalem, jealous for Zion, very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Now, this whole thing is showing how the world in the time of the first angel's message failed by being at ease and not being willing to be moved. And he said, you know, he basically is having an issue with Jerusalem and with the world because, well, his people, the church, weren't in a condition to help the world. And the world wasn't in a condition to even want to be helped. So the whole thing is kind of bad news, but there's comfortable words. It says, "Therefore, thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Zion with mercies." So being returned to Zion, I mean, isn't that what we see being returned to Jerusalem? In Revelation 10, we see the Shekinah return. And here it says, "Return to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem." So we see that there is still not only hope, but a declaration that Yahweh is returned and that the house will be built. So wisdom hath established her 7 pillars. The house is built. This, again, in the 7 Thunders study, some of these ideas will be expounded upon a lot more. But what does it mean for Yahweh to be returned to Jerusalem and the house is going to be built? What does that necessitate taking place?
I was going to actually maybe comment along those lines. And so first I'll say that, you know, when I heard you read that passage where it says, you know, how long until Yahweh, you know, returns and blah, blah, blah. You know, I think that people have a tendency to interpret that thought as though Yahweh just stopped caring. He became indifferent. Our heavenly family just kind of gave up on us, and then they've been hanging out till some appointed time, or whatever. But, really the reality is this idea that that they are longing for us to have unity with them.
Mm-hmm.
See it now in every passage of prophecy all throughout the Bible. So they have never stopped saying that. They've said it all. They've had their prophets just say that all along, which is basically, your need, your condition, your need, and our passionate love and power. That's basically the message, and they're in everywhere. But so now to answer your question, how long till he returns and does this thing? Well, it's not that he ever left. It's not that he ever stopped. It's not that they ever stopped caring. It's just that we couldn't bear it. We've been so indifferent and so trained by Babylonian thinking, the exact opposite of that, which is our lack of need and the indifference and lack of power of our heavenly family. And so yeah, what constitutes that is our sister, coming back and our allowing her presence back in and recognizing that, we need to hear her voice. And then what she says is what they've also said. Your need, our love and power, and here it all is. It's always been there for you.
Amen. Oh, totally. They are long suffering. That characteristic of our heavenly family stands out to me. They've been suffering so long with us, and they've been trying to arouse us for so long. And, through perversion of the true understanding of the scriptures and through all these things, we end up viewing them in a bad light. Even though they have been, we cannot comprehend the depth of their love. It's incredible. But what's told us in verse 17, again it's told, I return to Zion, my house shall be built. And then cry yet, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, my cities through prosperity shall yet be spread abroad, and Yahweh shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. That's the message that, again, is saying, prophesy again. So that's coming to Adventism. And what they were told is, hey, Yahweh is returned already, but Yahweh shall yet comfort Zion and shall yet choose Jerusalem. So we see that there was something that they were to look forward to right at the beginning of the Advent movement, right? Right at the beginning, they were told this thing to cry yet. But then they're also told that there's something coming, because from that point, this being comforted, Yahweh shall yet comfort Zion, is something future from when that is said to them. So there was a promise of something greater. Because, okay, here you are, you just went and you proclaimed mightily throughout the earth, and the earth was not moved. Therefore, I'm displeased with the heathen, and so on and so forth. And Jerusalem wasn't in the right condition. But there is a comforting to happen. So they were told in the early days of Adventism, there would be some sort of hope that they would have. And that message of comfort tries to come in 1888. That would be the thing which would prepare them to go through with prosperity and spread abroad and have the kingdom established. You know, Ellen White said it could have been done in 2 years. Now, our Heavenly Family knew that it was not going to happen quite like that. And in Revelation 10, when we view this in that connection, we see that there's something in Revelation 10 which was not, or which was supposed to be for a later time than the days of the early Advent movement, whether on the first, second, or third angel's message. And that was the finishing of the mystery. That was something that they were to look forward to. And Revelation 10 is where they have their focus, rather than Zechariah 1. So where they got this message that they would yet be comforted was by at least having it in their frame of reference that the mystery of God will be finished. And this message of comfort, you know, this is spoken of in Isaiah chapter 40, saying, comfort ye my people, saith your God. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned. For she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. And then it talks about this voice of one crying, in the wilderness prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. You know, this whole thing, this, as we've gone through before, so we won't go through all these things again, is the 9T Reformation. You know? The Millerite movement, that's a type of the 9T Reformation. And it didn't quite happen. The Rod movement, the entire purpose was to bring about the 9T Reformation, which is justification by faith in the individuals, the righteousness of God in the individuals, which is the setting up of the kingdom in the lands of the Gentiles, preparing the way to go back to the land of our fathers. So that was the whole purpose of the Rod movement, but wasn't quite happening. The branch movement, same thing. The whole purpose is to bring about the 9T Reformation. And man, I mean, it was just a red horse. And then we have even worsening of a condition through the ministries or through the times of the ministry of Lois and Dove. Now, this message at the end is a message of hope. In other words, all these things, the presentation of the horses, Zechariah and the angel, the man and the myrtle trees, is all showing the need, presenting the situation, and seeing how, man, someone's got to do something. And that someone to do something is our Heavenly Family, and Yahweh is returned. And there is to be a comforting message. And that's what is supposed to actually bring about in the hearts of the people a change. In fact, a new heart. And that's, again, Isaiah 40 is that message of comfort, the 9T Reformation. So if we miss all that, then we miss seeing the need. We miss seeing the promise of comfort. We miss that Yahweh is returned to Jerusalem. You know, so we need to understand all these things in the right context. Zechariah 1, again, its primary focus is not necessarily on the first angel's message, even though that is one of the main things that sets the framework for the chapter. So it is a big part of it, but primarily it is intended for our day rather than their own day, because they didn't understand this in the days of William Miller. and Ellen White. So these things show us the conditions, show us how all the way along it's been like this. And the other thing that should encourage us is that, man, if our Heavenly Family was able to send these forces throughout the whole earth, even though they didn't have the gospel restored to them, and they went through and were able to sound a great noise, then surely with the gospel restored to us, we can do the same thing, and greater works
Amen.
will you do. You know, greater works. So the Millerite movement, I mean, man, that seems so, I mean, it's just some random preachers who weren't even trained. They weren't even preachers at first. They were just, you know, your regular lay people.
They left their jobs because they were convicted that Christ was coming soon.
Yeah.
And they devoted the rest of their lives to trying to help prepare people for that.
And you notice how as they did that, and it didn't happen, the message right after that in Zechariah, Yahweh actually says, I am returned unto Zion. You know, so Christ did come, just not the Christ that they were thinking.
Yeah.
It wasn't the branch he, it was the branch she.
Yep.
It was our sister. You know, she came, and, you know, with her in our midst, and with her on the move, and with all these things taking place, I mean, look at what came about as a result of the Millerite movement. We had this whole Advent movement coming from that. And in one sense, that's not saying much, but in another sense, it's saying a lot. Because, man, I mean, think about how far-reaching the work of Ellen White was, you know? And that was what came as a result of the Millerite movement. Today, in our day, man, things will reign through prosperity. You know, there will be, like it said in Zechariah 1, that prosperity and will be spread abroad. And then as a result, the kingdom should be established in many nations that come and seek the Lord in Jerusalem. So that's our hope, that's our prayer. And we won't be able to... Actually, I'm just going to reference something quick. I don't have the actual reference, but it's from Ellen White, right at the end of the book Notebook Leaflets. And she talks about how some look at their past experience and they say, you know, well, the Lord, I had all this opportunity, I followed the truth, I did this and whatever. The Lord was near. And she says they look at that, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically gets across the idea of people pat themselves on the back because of their past experience in being close with the Lord. When she says, but if you were unconverted, she said that's nothing to pat yourself on the back for, because all the more reason that you have no excuse, that you should have been converted because the Lord was close. And this, I just wanted to mention that in relation to this, because the Lord is close. You know, our Heavenly Family is close. And the potential that's here. We look back on our history, we see all these wonderful things that our Heavenly Family has been leading us. All the more we have no excuse for not having this 90 Reformation go full tilt. And what that means, some people view that as a negative statement when someone says something like, we have an excuse. But it's really a positive statement, because what it's saying is that we've been given every opportunity. We have every opportunity. There is nothing hindering us. This 90 Reformation can go forward full tilt. Our Heavenly Family wants a people who are on the move with the Shekinah. No more time for stupidity, as the angel has said. No more time for not doing anything. You know, our Heavenly Family does not want us to come and hear these Bible studies and learn that, oh, you know, yeah, that's what this prophecy means, that's what this prophecy means, and that's how it relates to justification by faith, and, you know, yeah, Trent's saying these wonderful things, or whatever, you know. Our Heavenly Family does not want people to come and hear all that, and that's it. We need to be serious about this. I mean, think about how serious the Millerites were. They left their jobs, they, you know, whatever, put their families on welfare, whatever it was. I know it was a different situation, but they just went full tilt. They dropped what they were doing, and they moved.
It was life or death to them.
Life or death. And today, how much more should it be life or death? You know? So, what our Heavenly Family wants, they want us to take this seriously. They want us to be militant. They want us to put on the whole armor of Christ and march forward into battle. You know, no more of this, you know, coming and Bible study and then go through the week, work, try to get by with life, and then come back and hear some good things and say, well, one day this is going to be a different day. One day we're going to be in the kingdom and so on and so forth. No. If we don't act, one day we won't be in the kingdom. The Lord can raise up stones to be the children of Abraham. But don't we want to be those stones? You know, if we want to be those stones, if we want to be part of that building that the branch is building, then we have a part to play. No time for indifference and inactivity. The Shekinah is on the move. We were given a year, starting a year ago, a little over a year ago, where our Heavenly Family has been pleading with us to be justified, be made righteous by faith. And they have been opening this up to us, line upon line, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, here little and there little. They've been showing us this whole thing. And they have desired that we all receive justification and that we can have a justified, sanctified ministry, a wave sheath purified, no tear in our midst, you know, to have us all being made righteous and go forth proclaiming this and having the 90 Reformation going forward full tilt. And the reason why we haven't been able to have officers or these different functional roles so far is because our Heavenly Family has been waiting for people to receive life so that they can have this justified, sanctified ministry. But you know what? That time is drawing to a close. Soon the work is going to have to move forward and the message is going to have to be proclaimed, whether their instruments are going to be a white horse or a red horse, whether we are going to be justified or not. The message is going to have to move forward. And we may find the privileges of the opportunities and where our Heavenly Family could have used us may go to others, you know. And, you know, that period is drawing to a close. Our Heavenly Family is going to have to move forward, whether we receive life or not. So let's receive it. That's the message. Let's receive it because, man, there's just no time to joke around anymore. There really isn't. The first angel's message, it could have happened. There was a could have experience. It could have been. 1888, it could have been. The raw message, it could have been. The branch message, it could have been. Now, I mean, come on. Either it is or it isn't. It is or it isn't. I mean, is it not true? Are these things a theory to us, or is it reality? Are the Psalms being fulfilled? Is the house of David being established? Is the kingdom sprouting in the wilderness? Are the dry bones being raised from the dead? Is this the most significant thing that has happened since the time of Christ? Either it is or it isn't. Either it's a theory or it's a reality. If it's a reality, then let's get up and stand up, Let's march forward. Let's not allow ourselves to go into a stupor. Let's see, okay, well, oh wow, we had a new moon. A revelation was presented. New light. New light. Well, have we looked at it? Have we taken it as something that we need to examine for ourselves? Or do we come and listen to the Bible study and think, wow, how wonderful, how great. And then we wait till the next study, is this thing entertainment for us? Or is this divine instruction? Are these battle commands from the Lord of hosts? Do we want to be part of the hosts or do we not? Do we want to be those horses ridden by angels or do we not? Do we want to become proficient in understanding and explaining the gospel, in saving souls? Or do we want to be as one with our mouths as an open sepulchre and our bellies as the depths of the grave with injurious death pouring forth from us? Do we want to slay people with the sword of truth? Or do we want to poison people with the sourness of the breath of death? This is life and death. Yahweh is returned to Jerusalem. The messengers of comfort is here. What more must our heavenly family do? If we hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will we hear if one rose from the dead. And hey, what we're being told is that resurrection is happening. And yet, if we still have our ears closed and our eyes blinded, we have just taken it as a theory. Understand, if you're not resurrected, you have either chosen to resist the truth, which I don't believe to be the case for anyone here, or you have taken it as but a theory. Recognize that you need to be aroused. Look and see that you're in a stupor, that you're asleep, that you're dead in trespasses and sins. Recognize the need to be aroused, to be awakened, to be placed upon your feet as part of the mighty army, ready for Yahweh to sound the command and for you to shoot forward like lightning, like the seraphim, like an arrow from the Most High's bow. Be ready to march forward, leaping as you had hinds feet, climbing over walls, Joel 2, undefeatable, marching in rank, everything in order. You know, this is what our heavenly family wants now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for tomorrow. Our heavenly family wants this now, and we can receive it. We can be part of it. There is so much that our heavenly family is calling us to, both in terms of the life, the righteousness, the joy, the work to do, the fellowship together, the love that we can experience, the newness, the freshness of life. We are being called to so much. We are being called to the very presence of our sister. We are called to hasten the coming of our dear brother, our Savior, who died for us and to this day bleeds on our behalf. We're called to see the Most High face to face. We're going to see our father and mother. And they're real. They're real people. So let's not take this as a theory. Let's not. We will injure our heavenly family. We will injure others. But at the end of the day, the one who we're harming the most is ourselves. So, all on board. Let's hop on the train, you know? All right, well, does anyone have any closing thoughts? Or would anyone like to volunteer to close with prayer?
This is Norman. I have a thought.
Okay.
in relation to Zechariah 1 and Mrs. White's vision of the seven thunders, something kind of stood out to me when you said the red horse represented a impure church.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, in the vision of the seven thunders, when she's traveling to Zion, she comes across a group that have red on the border of their garment, and the little ones also have red on the border of their garment.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, well, that red represents martyrs who died for themselves. So that just kind of struck me, the red there and the red horse. So, you know, that's kind of words of comfort that the red horse is going to change.
Yeah, you know, as we were going through, it crossed my mind as we were reading the passage. It was just like the hope within me and a cry out to everyone who's part of the branch now to let this red become the red of the blood of Christ, which represents his life. Let it be that red, you know?
That's what I was taking it as before we looked at and studied. That's why I said.
Yeah. Now we know that when this initially applied, that what Ben Roden was saying about it was certainly the case and still is in terms of being impure. But let's allow that symbol to change, you know? Because, you know, here we are, still branches, albeit in a little further phase of things, but that phase of things is represented by the martyrs, just like Norman's pointing out. And so we can, you know, let ourselves be those resurrected martyrs. Not just martyrs, but let us be resurrected martyrs. Yeah. So that vision of the seven thunders is a beautiful thing. It is glorious. But, yeah, so no, I appreciate that thought. It is showing potential for a very hopeful picture.
Right.
And I just want to mention again, as I've been talking about kind of the importance of these things, the reality, and how seriously we should take these things. If we want to kind of have a snap into the picture of the reality of this, I mean, the ultimate, the most important, and the best way to do that is to actually receive justification by faith. But something that you can do that is just all too real, I mean, just contemplate, meditate upon everything that's happened in the past year. Consider how clearly the 1888 message is presented before us now, and how incredible it is that it's being forgotten. That some of these statements from Jones and Vega are really so clear. And how is it that we could go over 100 years in Adventism and not get it? Literally, read some of those statements from Jones and Vega and just have it go in one ear and out the other. Consider the statement by Ellen White, where she talks about the work of Jones represented to her as one passing around a basket of summer fruit, but speaking harsh words that none would receive it. And then she quotes Psalms of David. And then let's go and consider, remember, meditate upon, contemplate what we've had in the revelation of the Psalms. How very real is that? Consider how these things that we have written are not just ink and paper that showed up 10 years ago and we're making up stories, you know. Consider how very real. I mean, these, as I've been going through the Psalms, you know, I'm going and checking out the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls and all these things, which are documents from over 2,000 years ago. Over 2,000 years ago. And we have the wisdom of Solomon from over 2,000 years ago, which prophesied one of the most clear prophecies of Christ that we could imagine. And, you know, so these things are realities. What took place to the Jews in the history that we have recorded in the Bible and so on, these things are realities. And the decisions that they made, most people thought that what they chose was right. And that the decisions that they made a huge difference as to the outcome of the history of the world thus far. The decisions we make today will likewise make a huge difference, not only for us, but for the world. Just think about it. Any time there's been a big change in the world, when we look at things in a very minuscule way and think of the, the past 10 years, in one sense it seems like things haven't changed that much. But I mean, think about these men throughout history who made a huge difference in the world, names that are retained in history. All it was is someone choosing to do things a certain way. Someone chose to have determination and to be ambitious. In Desire of Ages, we're told that Christ expected much, therefore he attempted much. Let us expect much, and let us attempt much. Anyways, the battery on the laptop that I'm using here is at a very low percentage, so we need to close off the meeting, and we're at a good closing space anyways. So if anyone would like to volunteer to close with prayer, that would be great. Would you like to, Mom, actually?
I was just unmuting myself to say I would pray. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right. Dear precious Heavenly Family, we thank you for being there, for being on the move, sister. We know that you are, because so many are being saved that we never thought would come from the Lord. And we thank you so much for these messages that you're giving us. Please wake us up. Even though we are where we're at and we have this message, we still need extra strength and extra desire to do what is right. We desire it, but we need more. We need something that will be outstanding, that we will step forward in faith to do what you would have us to do. Be with each one of us, each branch candidate here, that we will have a special outpouring of your Spirit to help us get through what each one of us individually are passing through, so that we might be a part of this movement. Thank you so much for hearing us, for being there, as we said, for us each and every day. And we thank you for this wonderful Sabbath. We pray that you will take us into this next week more free to accept what our conscience is leading us to. So thank you for hearing our prayers. Help us, each and every one, to make the right decisions and not be tempted to do what's wrong, to listen to the voices that are telling us to do this or that, and obey immediately, so that we do not bring reproach upon us or upon your name. All these things we ask in the name of the branch. Amen.
I want to mention one quick thing, and then I got to close this off, and that is a wonderful instruction from our Heavenly Family, and that is to dive in head first into the baptism of Christ's death. Ask the Spirit to scrutinize you before your eyes according to the law. The end of Romans 5 says that when the law enters, sin abounds. Allow the law to enter and judge all your thoughts, words, and deeds by the law, so that you can see how much sin abounds, so that you can see the condemnation. And where sin abounds, grace does much more abound. So you will see the grace, the loving, nurturing, longing, yearning love of our Heavenly Mother. You will see that grace when you see how much sin abounds. You will see how much more grace abounds. And then you will see their love, you will see the worst of your case, and you can reach out in faith to accept their righteousness, and therefore grace can reign in the life through righteousness. That's all I wanted to say. Love you all. I have to close this off now because the computer's about to die. But love you all very much, and hope to talk to you guys soon. Blessings, blessings, blessings.
Love you guys. Good night.
Good night.